All right. Let's hope that we got everything working correctly this time. We're just going to check really quick before we get into a bunch of information about what we're talking about tonight. We'll just make sure that everything is working. And I think we are. I think we're good. Yep. All right. We are live. So, we're going to go over some things tonight about the disappearance of Paula and Brandon Wade. We talk about Paula and Brandon Wade a lot here, so if you're new here, then we appreciate you coming back. Expect that we do this quite often. So, we've reported a lot on Paula and Brandon Wade from a different platform, and we're going to start also sharing some of that content that we've previously shared because I find that some of it is pretty important. So, this week on Monday was the 22-year anniversary of Paula and Brandon Wade's disappearance, and that is devastating. Usually, an anniversary means you're celebrating something, and for an anniversary like this, it is no celebration when you're continuing to mark the years that you still have not found your family. And that's a really, really difficult situation. This year, it came on the heels of hurricane activity that hit Valdosta after going through Florida. They were hit by Helene, and then, of course, they just had Milton also go, close to their area. So, unfortunately, it has been kind of a whirlwind, but luckily, Valdosta Police Department did post about um, the disappearance, and they posted about it in the middle of the day, which was great. So, kudos for that. We're going to go over some articles that were put out for the anniversary, but I don't want to just go over these articles. I want to point some things out. We definitely have quite a few things I would like to discuss. I'm going to start out by saying the most important thing. If you have any kind of information, if you feel like you might have information, if you feel like you know somebody who was involved in Paula's life and you feel like you have something really, really minute or really, really big, maybe somebody told you something. Maybe perhaps you observed some interesting behavior around that time from somebody. It could be something as little as knowing where someone's favorite places were. It could be as big as they told me this secret. Or maybe we were in an argument and they threatened to do the same thing to me. All of these things are things that happen that often lead to answers. A lot of people don't even want to click on something that is not a case that has happened within the last year. Or if it is an older case and maybe they're clicking on it because it's just now going to trial or there's some kind of really bombshell update. Those are times that we really see people tuning into cases. Um Unfortunately, people do not generally like to follow older cases. But here's the thing. A lot of these a lot of these cases, of course, as everybody's seeing, Othram is like the Hulk of forensic evidence right now, especially older forensic evidence. So, they're rocking the winds out left and right. And that is really, really beefing up the audience that wants to listen to these things and take part in them and try to help spread awareness about them. And Paul and Brandon's case unfortunately fall into that category because they fall into this category of it's 22 years, and a lot of people get discouraged by that, and they're like, how are we going to do anything here? Clearly, this has been well investigated. This has been this or this has been that, and nothing has happened after all these years. We're finding out through the absolute hulk of forensics, Othram. That's not the case. We do have the ability to use our technology for good and further these cases that have been out for a long time. And so then you might tell yourself, well, that case doesn't even have, you know, hard evidence like maybe DNA or something like that. Not saying that relates to this case because that is not public information. However, there are other ways of finding these things out. We have seen cases recently that are quite a bit older and they're getting information in interesting ways. Maybe somebody, somebody they've once felt threatened by is no longer really a threat to them, or they at least no longer perceive them that way for whatever reason. So there's always ways to come forward. So again, if you do happen to know something, however big or small, there are a few things you can do if you want to reach out. Now, over on our website, themourningfeed.com, we have Paula and Brandon's case file. And after the lives, I always attach their case file to the description so everybody can go and check that out. On that page, there is an anonymous contact form. Well, there's a contact form, but you can use it anonymously. You can share your name and information if you want to. You can go as far as just using an anonymous email if you do want contact with us, but you don't want to reveal who you are. There's a few ways you can do that. So feel free to go there. You can also go to find Paula Wade at gmail.com is an email address that goes straight to the family if you don't want to deal with law enforcement. It's understandable. It happens. If you're in that position and you don't want to deal with them, you can go straight to the family. You can come straight to us. The information will make it to the right hands in order to process the information in relation to the investigation as to where they are. So, those are a couple of ways you can do it anonymously if you don't want to deal with law enforcement. If you are not, if you don't have a problem with dealing with law enforcement, there is another way that you can do things, which is by calling the FBI or going online and sharing information with the FBI. You can do that through the FBI Atlanta field office at 770 216 3000. You could also go to tips.fbi.gov. Those are all ways that you can help share information. We encourage you also to use the NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. You can call them at 1-800 The Lost. So those are a few ways that you can share information if you do have it. Like I said, it could be big or small. It could be a matter of, I know somebody associated with this case and they had some really weird behaviors going on at the time, or they told me something crazy one day and I was always scared of them, but I'm ready to come forward with this. I'm not scared of them anymore. Um, or maybe you are scared of somebody still. Let us know. Let us know how we could help you. There's ways to do that without doing things that make you feel like it would further put you in danger. So, keep all of that in mind anytime you view their content. If you happen to know Paula or someone in her life, it is imperative that you share that information because this is somebody who is also capable of doing something to someone else. Paula is clearly um, not out there just living her best life. There's no way she would stay away from her family for that amount of time. So let's go over to an article I'd like to share first, and then we're going to get into some articles that are not um, are not fully correct. And I feel like it's really important that we talk about those and we talk about why. And a detail that I've never really talked about before, I think I want to talk about today as far as these articles go. So this one was put out on Newsbreak, and we're going to read through that real quick. That photo you see is of Paula Wade. So it says for 22 years, the family of Paula and Brandon Wade has watched Brandon grow up through age progressed images, missing persons flyers, and haunting headlines about the Georgia mother and her 3-year-old son who vanished from Valdosta, Georgia. This year, Brandon Wade would turn 25 years old, the same age that Paula was when they both were reported missing. And that is, if you just let that sink in, I mean, that is pretty wild. The same age that Paula was when they were reported missing, that is the age that 3-year-old Brandon turned this year. So they disappeared just a week before they were planning to move to Florida. Paula and Brandon both, they were planning on moving. And the investigation began in 2002 after Paula was absent from Sam's Club. She worked there for quite a while, and she was getting a transfer from Sam's Club in Valdosta, Georgia, down to Florida in the Orlando area. We've talked about this several times here. Just wait for it for a moment, and we're going to get to some of the other stuff. So she was so reliable and well liked that even now when her family goes to the area, people who see them and see them passing out the flyers, they always remember Paula, and they'll share stories about Paula and what she was like to work with and how helpful she was. And she just really left an impression on people, anybody that she came in contact with. So she was really, really reliable as well. She was well liked, and her coworkers quickly became worried when she didn't show up for work on Monday morning. So they went and they visited her apartment. They found no sign of Paula or Brandon. There was no sign of Paula's roommate, Marcus Burrows. So she had a roommate at the time, a young Georgia man. He was there going to Valdosta State University. That was why I believe that he came to Valdosta. And so she needed a roommate at the time because her husband had been moved to South Carolina with the Air Force. He was transferred there. And so she had to make ends meet. And of course, it's a strain. You got a family living in two separate states. It's an added expense and, all of the things that come with that. So in early October, Paula made plans to move to Florida after her husband, Lance Wade, was transferred from Georgia, like I said, to South Carolina with the Air Force. She arranged a transfer with Sam's Club and set a date to move. Now, at the time, there was not a transfer available where she could be closer where Lance was in South Carolina. So she took this one in Florida because at least she had family there. Now, just a day before their disappearance, Paula missed a phone call with her parents on Sunday. Now, the missed phone call probably doesn't sound that alarming considering it's become quite common to not answer calls and primarily use our phones as a gaming device. But this was 2002, and Paula's Sunday evening chats with her parents could be likened to a weekly dinner date. Her parents had a certain day and time each week that they would catch up with their adult children individually. They had a few children, and Paula's scheduled catch up with her parents was every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Not 6:31, not 5:59. It was 6:30 on the dot. She had a military father, and time being on time and things like that were important. So you can very much see that in their family, that they definitely took on a lot of their father's spirit with those things in their work life and everything else. And so Paula was reliable, she was on time. They would talk every Sunday at 6:30. And in all of their adult lives, all the kids, this was the first time that any of the kids had missed a scheduled call with their parents. So the missed call was concerning, but it was 1 week before the big move to Florida, and her parents just kind of assumed, she's probably busy. She's got 3-year-old Brandon, she's packing to move, probably shouldn't raise the alarm bells or anything. She is an adult. So, aside from the missed call, there were no other reasons to be concerned. Paula didn't say anything concerning to anybody in her life that we're aware of. She was making plans, moving forward with those plans, including arranging the moving truck and asking her parents to help with the move. Now, I will add one thing. She didn't say anything concerning, but there has been talk before about she reached out for help the weekend of her disappearance, and she did. But I'm talking prior to that. There was no there was no concerning talk coming from Paula Wade. She was planning. She was moving forward. She was figuring out, a good environment for her and Brandon with family close by, whether that be with Lance or her family, and making sure that she, still had a job during that. It was things were moving forward for her. So after her coworkers, they found no sign of her or Brandon at the Commons, which it was the Commons apartments. It's now the Gables apartments. Law enforcement was contacted to make a report, and Paula's family all began making plans to travel to Valdosta to search for any answers and to basically find out why no one could find them. It didn't make any sense to them that they would have just vanished from Valdosta, but they figured there had to be some explanation, something. So all of their personal belongings, glasses, like eyeglasses, contacts, identification cards, wallet, keys, Paula's car, Brandon's favorite toys, everything was found inside the apartment. And as time went on, not a single question had any explanations. Additional questions piled up alongside the years that passed without a single explanation about what happened to Paula and Brandon. Now, each year, their family makes a trip back to Valdosta to search, hand out flyers, speak to people who knew Paula, and meet with the media. Anybody that wants to talk about Paula and Brandon, they're more than happy to talk about them to anyone that wants to talk about them. Now, last year, their case was featured on the USA Today's website. News Nation actually was also on their front page, I believe, if I remember right. WXTL, it was on the front page of something. And multiple other outlets after the FBI had added Paul and Brandon to their missing persons database, which was a huge, huge deal last year. To get their faces on the FBI website was just the absolute determination of her family just continuing to work. So it's important that people note that Paula knew people all over Valdosta, at work, in the community, through the Moody Air Force Base because her husband was stationed there. She was known to give coworkers a ride to work. She was also known to accept a ride from other individuals, and she was not afraid to help anybody who may have needed assistance. They were both reported missing on October the 14th, 2002, on a Monday, and ironically, this year the anniversary was also on a Monday. But it's important to remember that they didn't likely disappear on that Monday. They likely disappeared sometime before that Sunday evening phone call. If Paula would have been in distress, I very much believe that Paula would have reached out. Just because she missed that 6:30 call, I don't think if she had the capability to reach out, I believe she would have reached out to her family. So that would, say kind of send a signal that it was likely before that time. But it would have been after she was last seen at work. So it's very likely that Saturday, Saturday evening has always been what I've kind of looked at as a very possible timeline. We have to take other circumstantial information that surrounds that in order to hone in more on that timeline. But if we want help, if we want answers, and we want people to come forward with information, I believe having some kind of loose timeline is important for people. And so I think it's important if you knew about something in this time frame that you come forward in whatever way, even if it's anonymous. We'll take anything. If you think that the police have it wrong, if you think that You have, any kind of information on, what they may think. And if you think that's wrong, let us know, because we're not opposed to looking at anything at all. So last year, Paula Wade's sister explained her determination to USA Today, to their reporter, in what I would say is the simplest of terms. I have no other choice, or I have no other option, is what she said. And that's really just how their family feels about it. They have no other option. This is what they have to do. Paula would do this for them. They're a unit as a family. They're all very dedicated to finding answers. And I think that that statement really sums it up. Paula and Brandon's visibility on various databases and advocacy groups is really a testament of the dedication that their family has for Paula, for Brandon, and for each other. Their faces can be seen at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the FBI database, the Polycloss Foundation, of course, our website, the Mourning Feed, the Charlie Project, the GBI database, many other databases, podcasts, social media posts. Their family has shown up for them in every way possible, while also assisting other families and raising money for the NCMEC through their own projects. And you can even visit their website at paulawade.com. And like I said, find paulawade at gmail.com, go straight to the family. It's really also a good thing for media. If you get an inquiry from media as far as, um, you know, any kind of information that you might see out there where you can do an inquiry for media. Sometimes Dateline does it, or WALB, or um, WSB TV. There's a lot of local ones that do it, but bigger media does it too, where they'll put a thing out and say, share a case with us, share a story. Well, if you do that, make sure that you include that email, and they can get a hold of the family very easily that way. Um, we're really, really, really excited every year when we see, you know, renewed coverage coming out about their story and the information. So let's go to something else real quick. This is a local publication, the Valdosta Daily Times. This is the article that they shared for the 22-year anniversary just 2 days ago. So it says the faces of a mother and son who have been missing from Lowndes County for 22 years will soon be on gas pump screens around Georgia and Florida. And that's true. They will be. They're going to be on the screens that you see at the gas pump, showing their NCMEC flyer. And, anybody stopping at a gas station is going to be able to see their faces there. And that's going to be amazing. I believe it's in Georgia and Florida. Again, a huge, huge, huge um, product of their family's determination to just keep getting any kind of awareness that they can. So the article goes on to say the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, together with media partner GSTV, will feature the mother and son on pump screens. Sounds so weird to say pump screens. At more than 2,800 gas stations around the two states through the end of October. And the center said in a statement. So then it says Paula Wade, then 25, was last seen on October 12th, 2002, leaving her job at Sam's Club. By October 14th, her family was receiving calls that she had never shown up for work. Also true. Her son Brandon, then age 3, vanished with her. Also true. Paula Wade moved to Valdosta with her husband. And it says in the Air Force, he was assigned to Moody Air Force Base, which is their Air Force Base there in Valdosta, if you're not familiar with the area. They had their son Brandon, but the marriage failed. And that's where they actually get it wrong. Now, this is much easier to overlook when you see, not overlook, but not, you know, not be too puzzled by when a outside media outlet gets it wrong, who, perhaps hasn't talked to the family or anything like that. It's understandable. Sometimes things are wrong, right? We all get it. But this has been ongoing for 22 years. For 22 years, local publications have gotten it wrong. And here, let's just take it one step further. And I'm just going to put this out here for a second. I just want to make it perfectly clear when I speak on this podcast or on a live when I speak about their case, I am speaking from my own opinion and stance. Just because the family has spoken with me before, do not come at them for my commentary. This is my opinion. And the family doesn't always align with my opinion. And that's okay. It's good to have a few different angles on things. But I try to stay in line with their determination and the class and grace that they have extended on this case, and they certainly have. So I don't say this in anybody's opinion but my own. But this is frustrating because of the fact that their family extends so much grace, and they're always thankful. They're always thankful for everything everyone does. And they always show that they're thankful. But this is the Valdosta Daily Times. Paula Wade disappeared in Valdosta, Georgia. They have been printing misinformation about her case for 22 years. And would you like to hear the worst part? Are you ready? Don't come for me. But the board, you want to know who sits on the board of the Valdosta Daily Times? Brian Childress. You know, the former chief of police? He sits on the board for this paper. Now, I'm not saying he's responsible for this article. It wasn't written by him. And I'm not coming for the person who wrote it. I'm just making a point here. 22 years. Now, I'm going to add one more thing into this, and I'm never going to say it again. Because I have a feeling not everybody would be happy with me saying this. And I do respect everybody involved. But here's one more thing. What is the wording, but the marriage failed? What does that even mean? Who uses those words? And why have those exact words been repeated for 22 years? Now, typically you might say, but, maybe her and her husband weren't together at the time, or maybe they were going through a divorce, or maybe they were separated. Separated would be the most common term, even in 2002. But here we are in 2024, and we're still using the words, but the marriage failed. I really wonder where that came from. Where did that start? Where did that originate? It'd be good to know. Maybe we'll get to the bottom of that, and then we'll be able to understand better. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're jumping to some kind of crazy conclusion here that doesn't exist. But I'd be interested to know where that came from. 22 years this has been talked about. And the thing is, it just puts out the wrong context on what the facts are. So here's the facts. They were not separated. They were still very much married. They were living apart at the time because they both needed to be working and couldn't be without a job. They had a 3-year-old son to take care of. And so she needed to keep her job. She didn't need a lapse in employment. So she got a transfer within the company she worked for. She was going to go to Florida, spend time closer to family, and figure things out from there as far as what they were doing as a family, when they would be living all in the same place again. There was no divorce until years later, and she was missing. It's public information. I mean, it's not hidden or anything. It was done after her disappearance. But during the time of her disappearance, there was no divorce mentioned. I have thoroughly asked her family about this for the last couple of years. Um, this is a fact. So right before, in fact, if you want to go a little bit further, I'll give you a piece of information from the family that I collected right before she disappeared when she's planning to move to Florida. Lance, her husband, was coming down to help her move. He was going to help load up the U-Haul. He was going to, help out with Brandon. Um, these were these were all ongoing. They had an ongoing relationship at the time, and nobody had mentioned divorce. And if somebody mentioned divorce, Paula would have told her family, like, yeah, well, looks like I'm getting a divorce. And she probably wouldn't have been too thrilled about it, I imagine. I don't know. I didn't personally know Paula, but from other sources, I would think that would be a major development in her life. It would not just be, oh, yeah, my husband's gone and moved to Florida. Or, it just, that's not how it went. So for 22 years, this has been perpetuated. And 7 years, exactly 7 years after Paula's disappearance, when it was something that they could legally do, after 7 years, legally, her husband could go about it a couple of different ways in order to seek a divorce with having, a wife who's missing. And that he did that the way that there's a few ways you can do that. It depends on your state and everything else, but there's a couple ways you can go about it. The way that he chose to go about it is by issuing notices in the paper that state, you know, I'm seeking out this person to respond for a divorce. It's basically saying I put out a notice for X amount of time trying to get in touch with this person. Nobody seems to know where they're at. I'm allowed to now go on with my life. And that's what he did. 7 years exactly after her disappearance, he got a divorce. So those are all facts and they're public. It's public information on the docket. It's not a secret. So I'm just saying that to say that this is very well known information. So for a newspaper that's local from the same town where the person disappeared, where a person who was formerly the police chief sits on the board, you would think it would be easily accessible to get the facts and to know the case pretty easily. This article is like, look, it's not even very long. It's very short. And it's got just the shortest sentences the whole way. It's not like it would be difficult to seek out to ensure that this was factual before posting it. So anyways, it goes on to say Brandon is not a person of interest in the case. Now that's another thing that's been very confusing because law enforcement says that no one's been ruled out. Well, have people been ruled out? Because there's statements that they've been ruled out, there's statements that they haven't been ruled out. So from a public standpoint, reading the articles can be a little bit confusing. I just wish there would be a better push to set some things straight, perhaps. I have no idea why details like this are being reported in this case, even. But anyways, it says that Brandon's father is not a person of interest, according to police in past interviews. He continued, oh, I said Brandon. Sorry, Lance is not a person of interest. Thank you very much, G, for pointing that out. But it doesn't even make any sense to even say something like this. When you're just trying to collect information like this, what is the point in saying that Brandon's father is not a person of interest in the case? I'm not coming for Brandon's father. We don't know who did this. We don't know who's responsible for any type of association in relation to the disappearance of Paula and Brandon. But why post details like this? It makes no sense. And I know, I'm letting myself show here a little bit in just how much angst I feel about this every time I see it. I know. But maybe we need a little bit of that right now. 22 years they've been missing. And how much of it is from misinformation? I don't know. Nobody knows. So it's important that we get it right. So let's get it right. Paula Wade was still married at the time. This report in this article, where a former police chief sits on the board of the newspaper that's local to the town she disappeared in, has been reporting for 22 years that the marriage failed, that Brandon's father is not a person of interest in the case. Another detail that I cannot tell you if he is a person of interest right here today because there's mixed information. I've personally been told by a detective on this case, who was on this case for the longest, that no one's been ruled out. So that's what I'm going on. And that was when I first entered the chat, which was just a few years ago. This has been going on for 22 years. So, no, the marriage didn't fail, as to everyone I've talked to, and I've talked to probably too many people. So, the marriage didn't fail. Brandon's father not being a person of interest in the case, I'm not sure anybody knows that, so I'm not sure how you could report that. By the time of October 2002, he was assigned to another military base out of state. That's true. Brandon's father, Paula's ex-husband, it says, has always cooperated in the investigation. Lord have mercy. I mean, yeah, now he's her ex-husband at this point. Paula had worked at a few years at Sam's Club. She and Brandon lived with one of her friends in an apartment at the Commons. She drove a 1998 Chevy Blazer, according to family reports. For anybody who has just joined us, I saw a couple people just joined. We're talking about the disappearance of Paula and Brandon Wade. This week on Monday was the 22-year anniversary of their disappearance. Um, so we appreciate anybody joining us and tuning in. We have their case file on our website at themorningfeed.com, where you can view all of the information that we have out there as well. So these are some of the articles that have came out recently that we're discussing, and these articles are systematically wrong every year, and so we're just kind of going over things a little bit because Paula Wade's family is just always so gracious and thankful for a social media share, a post from any publication, everything. So they're not going to want to appear like they don't appreciate this, of course, because they do. But for me, as somebody who has poured a lot of time into this, in looking into the details and seeing who I could talk to, calling law enforcement and talking to them to make sure I have my details straight, it's enraging to see. So anyhow, Paula was not known to be part of the party crowd. She was not a person to suddenly leave town. She was a good employee at work. She was making plans to move from Valdosta, returning home to her parents in Florida. She contacted her parents regularly, at least once a week. There is no known reason for why she would feel compelled to suddenly disappear, according to police. In 2023, Paula and Brandon were listed on the FBI missing persons page. The family has hope that we're going to find them, she said. We have a strong faith, and miracles happened before, Paula's sister said in a prior interview. And then it gives the same tip lines that we've shared here for the FBI Atlanta field office, the NC, MEC, and of course we shared our personal private anonymous tip lines that you can go through for our website, or by reaching out to findpaulawade@gmail.com that goes straight to the family. Okay, so moving forward, this is the press release from last year, 2023, that also talks about their about their case. So let's just talk about Helene for a second. They've been missing for 22 years, and there have been some wicked storms to come through the area. Hurricane Helene would be the most recent one that brought them significant damage. I think Valdosta saw more from Helene than they did from Milton. And I mean, they had tons of people without power. People are still displaced from the hurricane. Hurricanes kick other things up too, like debris, like, you know, things in the environment, dirt. It totally can change the landscape in certain areas very quickly. So we always keep that in mind because there is a possibility if something sinister happened that perhaps we need to be searching for something that we don't really want to talk about in the Valdosta area. And if that's the case, these hurricanes always kick up a lot of anxiety as well. So I want to also remind anybody in the Valdosta, Georgia area to please watch out, keep your eye out, try to vaguely familiarize yourself with what a bone looks like. If you happen to see one, make sure you report it. I know that's awful to say, um, but we need answers no matter what happened. Also, this is the FBI. The top right photo is the FBI age progressed image of Paula. So if you've ever seen anybody that looks like that, make sure that you report it. You just never know what happens in circumstances like this. And when you say that, this is crazy to think that after 22 years there could be some kind of answer here, some kind of resolution, it's not. Who remembers Melissa Highsmith? I bring her up in relation to this case all the time. 50 years, I think it's what, 50 years that she was missing. And then all of a sudden, they find out where she is and who took her. They probably didn't think she was still alive, even. But, and her parents are still alive, so they were able to be reunited, and she was able to get a lot of answers and a lot of love and support that I think that she's probably needed for a long time, considering who she grew up with. These photos also are age progressed photos that were done by the NCMEC. And so you can kind of see there what they propose that they could look like at this point. So there's a lot of places that you can pull from to share information about Paula and Brandon. And it could be so close to finding exactly what is needed. It could be just the smallest thing that absolutely changes this entire investigation. And I know that it can be difficult to put yourself out there if you do happen to know something. It can be difficult to put yourself out there in a situation like this. If you're scared of somebody, if you feel intimidated, I encourage you to reach out though. I encourage you to reach out through us, especially because we would be happy to guide you and steer you into what the possibilities could be for you to stay protected while divulging information about such a sensitive matter. So, those are a couple of the articles that came out. Atlanta, Fox Atlanta also did an article today, and that just came out just a little bit ago. I know that a lot of the reporting on their case can seem quite vague, but I encourage you to remember that there are times that things need to be vague when investigations need to be protected. It doesn't mean that information does not exist. It does not mean that there is not quite bombshell information associated with the case. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means it's not being talked about. And sometimes that is for the best. So if you do have information, please make sure you share it through the morningfeed.com. Find Paula Wade at gmail.com through the family, the FBI website, or the FBI Atlanta Field Office tip line, or the National Center at 1-800 The Lost. I know that I did a little ranting and raving But I just want to reiterate, it is always so great and so amazing to see people reporting about their disappearance and the investigation. It is always so good to see that, and I'm glad that even more media outlets, as the years go by, are really joining into that effort. And the family is over the top thankful every time, even if there's misinformation. They're like, it's awareness. It's good. It's okay. But I think it's important that we also hold each other accountable. If I misreport on something, I expect somebody to say something. So again, just please keep that in mind um, as we talk about certain things. There are certain things that are sensitive about this case, and there are people who have been dedicated to this case for many years. The Valdosta Daily Times has reported on any development, and on the anniversary, they have done that, and that's great. It's amazing that they're keeping their faces out there. It would just really be really awesome to we could get past certain things. There's no reason we should have to bring this up. Every year I make some kind of video about the fact that, this headline or this article or that article is printing misinformation about what Paula's life was at the time. So just keep that in mind. Um, Everybody's always grateful. We don't want anybody to not report on them because they got bad feedback on something. But I think it's important when you have somebody who is familiar, very familiar with their case, right there within your reach of the newspaper, and somebody that you can just easily ask, hey, can you look at this article real quick and tell me if it's all accurate and correct? Um, so anyways, I'm done with that now, but don't don't come for the family just because I get very nitpicky about how these things are reported on. Because at the end of the day, it could be the difference of a tip coming in or not, of information being shared or not, of answers coming or not. Let's start from a basis of truth if we're seeking truth. That's my philosophy. So anyhow, um thank you everybody who listens to this on the replay, who joined us tonight. We're really, really appreciative of you listening to Paul and Brandon's story, because it is a 22-year-old story that has been talked about now. I also want to really quickly mention some of the comments. Um, Lots of comments out there varying between the roommate did it, the husband did it. Um, Nobody knows who did it. That's why there are people of interest, not suspects in the case. So nobody knows who did it. So let's not try to push any narrative for one or the other publicly. If you have information to share, you have found something. If you're a sleuth and you have found something, reach out, share it with me or the family, um, or even law enforcement. But if you see things, there can be things that get misreported on, and this and that, but don't try to push any kind of narrative towards one or the other. We're not trying to come for anybody. We just want the truth and want answers, and ultimately, above justice or anything else, the family wants to find them and actually lay them to rest if something bad has happened, and if not, they want to find them and make sure they're safe. So those are the important things, not going after anybody. And also, another thing I see in the comments a lot is, I have followed this case for so many years. And so I just also want to say thank you. We see that over and over again. So, on behalf of the family, too, I'm sure they would want to say thank you. If you are one of those people who have followed this case for years and you continue to click on anytime you see information about them, then thank you. And continue to share their faces. This isn't over. This is far from over. So with that, I'm going to stop complaining. And if you see any type of news articles or anything for the anniversary this week for Paul and Brandon, share them out. Help get their faces out there. And we will be back next week to catch up and see what else has been released. We will not be complaining. We're going to be gracious, um, and the way that we like to do things typically. So I'm gonna go check my email and see if I have any angry emails. And I hope you all have a great night.